The mines of Zalvora, 6 stretched like a gaping wound beneath the planet's iron-gray sky, where the horizon burned crimson in the perpetual dusk of twin suns. The air smelled of ozone and sulfur, thick with the acrid scent of disturbed minerals. Machinery rumbled in the distance, carving into the planet's crust with mechanical indifference. To the human miners who toiled in these caverns, Zalvora 6 was just another hellish rock to be stripped of its riches before moving on to the next. To Mira, it was enemy soil. She stood on the ridge overlooking the excavation site, her violet eyes narrowing beneath the visor of her combat helm. Her presence here was an insult to the Thalvara Dominion, the matriarchal empire that had ruled this sector for over a millennium. Humans were interlopers, invaders, primitive creatures who had spread like a fungus beyond soul. And yet, despite the Dominion's superior technology, despite their battle-hardened fleets, the humans would not yield. And now, Mira had been sent to negotiate. She tightened her grip on the hilt of her plasma blade. This was not a task befitting a Thalvara warrior. She should be on the battlefield, not in a pit of dust and sweat, speaking with men. The humans had agreed to send an emissary. She expected an officer, perhaps a representative of their corporate overlords. Instead, the one who climbed the rocky path toward her was clad in a worn-out work jacket, dust clinging to his boots, his face lined not with age, but with the unmistakable weight of hard labor. He wasn't what she expected. "You must be the alien they sent," the man said, stopping a respectful distance away. Mira straightened, standing to her full height, taller than him by at least a head. "I am Mira Valcora, first blade of the Thalvara. Who speaks for the humans?" The man wiped sweat from his brow and grinned. "That'd be me. Name's Sam Calloway. I run things down here." Mira frowned. "You are the highest-ranking human here?" "Nah," he admitted, rolling his shoulders. "Just the guy who keeps the drills running. But I figure if we're going to talk about sharing this rock, better it be between folks who actually work on it." She had expected arrogance, condescension. Instead, he looked at her as if she were just another person, not an alien, not an enemy, just someone standing in the same dust and breathing the same stale air. It was unsettling. Mira had been raised to believe men were lesser. The Thalvara Dominion was built on the bones of matriarchs, where leadership, intellect, and war were the province of women. Males existed to serve, to support, never to lead. It was a natural order, an unchallenged truth. And yet, this human, this miner, spoke to her as though they were equals. "Your people have no right to mine this world," she said, her voice steady. "It belongs to the Dominion." Sam sighed. "I figured you'd say that. But I got 100 folks down there who don't see it that way. They came here to work, not fight." "The Dominion does not negotiate with invaders," she snapped. He shrugged. "Then I guess we've got ourselves a problem." There was no hostility in his tone, no fear. He was simply stating a fact. She expected him to bristle, to lash out, or to cower. But instead, he just stood there, waiting. Mira felt a strange frustration bubbling within her. "You do not act like the others." Sam chuckled. "That's so? You should be arrogant," she said, "or groveling. But you do neither." His smile faded slightly. "Ain't got much use for either." She studied him, searching for some deception, some trick. But there was only sincerity in his rough, calloused hands and sun-worn face. This was a man who knew struggle, who understood labor. Strange. The negotiation dragged on for days, and Mira found herself speaking with Sam more than she had intended. He was persistent, but not forceful. He argued, but without cruelty. And, most perplexingly, he listened. When she spoke of the Dominion's claim, he countered with stories of men and women who had given up everything to carve a life in the void. When she spoke of Thalvara's strength, he told her of human endurance. And when she accused him of defying natural order, he simply asked, "Who decided what's natural?" No man had ever spoken to her like this, and she hated that it intrigued her. Her fellow Thalvara warriors watched her with suspicion, whispering that she was growing too familiar with the humans. But she ignored them. She was only here to complete her mission, to find a resolution that would allow her people to withdraw with honor. And yet, Each conversation with Sam left her questioning things she had never doubted before. One evening, as they stood at the edge of a ridge overlooking the mines, Sam turned to her. "Why do you fight, Mira?" She exhaled slowly, watching the distant glow of plasma drills below. "Because it is my duty." "That's not what I asked." She glanced at him, irritation flickering in her gaze. "I do not expect you to understand." He smiled wryly. "Maybe not, but I'm a skin anyway." Mira hesitated. "It is what I was born to do." "Maybe," Sam said, crossing his arms. "But is it what you want to do?" She opened her mouth to answer. And then, for the first time in her life, she didn't know what to say. The days stretched into weeks. The ceasefire held, but the Dominion was growing impatient. Mira's superiors demanded results. Yet, every time she prepared to leave, she found herself lingering. She told herself it was because the negotiations weren't complete, that she needed more time. But deep down, she knew the truth. It was him. Sam was unlike any man she had ever known. He did not seek dominance, nor did he submit. He did not play the games of power and control that defined her world. He simply was. And in his quiet confidence, Mira saw something she had never seen before. An equal. The thought was terrifying. One evening, as they stood beneath the swirling iron sky, Sam turned to her. "You ever thought about what happens after all this?" She frowned. "After what?" "This war. This fight over dirt and rocks." Mira hesitated. "The Dominion will prevail." "Maybe," Sam said. "Or maybe we find another way." She studied him, something unspoken passing between them. And then, before she could stop herself, she asked, "What other way?" Sam smiled. "Guess we'll have to find out together." For the first time, Mira wondered if she wanted to. Mira had never believed in fate. The Thalvara Dominion taught its warriors that destiny was a crutch for the weak. Strength carved the path forward, not superstition. Yet as she stood beside Sam on the ridge, watching the dusty horizon bleed into darkness, she felt something shifting. It was a subtle thing, like the first tremor before an earthquake, unseen, but undeniable. She should not be lingering. Her duty was to return to the fleet, to report her findings, to push for a swift and decisive end to this human occupation. And yet, she hesitated. Not because of strategy, not because of duty, because of him. Sam had changed something in her, and she hated that she could not name what it was. "You're quiet tonight," Sam observed, his voice carrying the same rugged ease that had begun to chip away at her defenses. Mira exhaled sharply. "I have nothing to say." "Could have fooled me," he said, flashing her a knowing grin. She turned to face him, arms crossed. "You presume too much, human." His grin widened. "And you pretend too much, warrior." Her fingers twitched toward the hilt of her plasma blade, more out of habit than true aggression. She had threatened men for less. And yet, the fire in Sam's gaze wasn't defiance. It was something else, something deeper. "You should fear me," she said softly. Sam tilted his head, as if considering the thought. Then, after a moment, he shook his head. "Nah." Mira blinked. "Why?" "Because you don't want me to." She should have laughed, should have scoffed at his absurd confidence. But instead, her throat tightened, and she found herself at a loss for words. Damn him. The next morning, the Dominion fleet arrived. Mira had known it was only a matter of time. Thalvara warships were unlike human vessels, sleek, obsidian leviathans that carved through the void with the grace of predators. When they descended into Zalvora's atmosphere, the sky itself darkened, their gravity wells bending the air into an unnatural hush. The miners panicked. Sam didn't. Mira had expected him to be defiant, to rally his people in some futile show of resistance. Instead, he remained calm, gathering the workers, ensuring their safety. His mind was already working, thinking of solutions rather than sacrifices. It was frustratingly admirable. As the Dominion troops deployed, Mira strode to the front of the mining colony, her presence alone halting the advance. The armored warriors, their faces hidden behind the smooth, reflective visors of their battle helms, stiffened at the sight of her. Then, one of them stepped forward. "Commander Veskra." Mira's blood chilled. Veskra was not just a superior officer. She was a legend, a veteran of 100 campaigns, a woman whose name was whispered across the stars. She was everything a Thalvara warrior aspired to be, and she was here to clean up Mira's mess. Mira Valcora, Veskra said, her voice a blade honed on steel. Step forward. Mira obeyed. The commander's gaze flickered to the humans behind her. You have delayed our reclamation of this world. I was negotiating, Mira said evenly. Veskra's lips curled. With them, Mira held her ground. They are not as weak as we believed. A silence fell, and then, slowly, Veskra smiled. But it was not a kind smile. It was the smile of a predator who had already decided how the hunt would end. You've gone soft, she said. Mira tensed. I have done my duty. No, Veskra said, stepping closer. You have failed your duty. The words hit harder than any blow. Mira had spent her life proving herself, earning her rank, her right to stand among the strongest. But now, in the eyes of her people, she was tainted. And the worst part? She wasn't sure they were wrong. That night, the Dominion prepared for war. The humans would not stand a chance. The mining colony's defenses were laughable compared to the might of the fleet. When the order came, it would not be a battle. It would be a massacre. Mira stood at the edge of the encampment, her thoughts a storm she could not silence. She heard Sam approach before he spoke. They're gonna kill us, aren't they? He asked, his voice quiet but unwavering. Mira did not answer. He sighed. Can't say I'm surprised. She turned to him, frustration boiling over. Why do you not resist? Because I know when a fight's unwinnable, he said simply. Doesn't mean I'll roll over. Just means I gotta find another way. Another way. The words echoed in her mind, an unwelcome whisper of doubt. Sam exhaled, staring at the stars. Tell me something, Mira. Do you want this to happen? She opened her mouth, closed it. For the first time in her life, she didn't know what she wanted, and that terrified her more than any war. The next morning, the order came. Veskra's voice rang through the command hub, cold and absolute. Purge the human presence. Mira stood motionless as the Thalvara warriors advanced. Her warriors. Her people. She had fought beside them, bled beside them. And yet, as she watched them march toward the colony, her stomach twisted in a way it never had before. Sam stood at the gates, arms crossed, unflinching. The fool. He should run. He should beg. But instead, he simply looked at her. No words. Just a silent question. A question she did not want to answer. And then, the first shot was fired. The battle had begun. Mira's hand clenched around the hilt of her plasma blade. And in that moment, she knew. She had a choice. A choice she had never been meant to have. Her duty demanded one path. Her heart whispered another. The warrior in her screamed for honor. But the woman in her, she was no longer sure. And so, Mira did the one thing she had never done before. She hesitated. Hesitation was death. Mira had spent her entire life knowing this truth, carving it into her bones with every battle, every command, every decision that had led her here. And yet, as the first shots split the air, as plasma fire rained toward the colony, she hesitated. And in that heartbeat of uncertainty, everything changed. The Dominion forces surged forward in perfect synchronization, their movements precise, unstoppable. Human workers scrambled for cover, their meager defenses useless against the relentless advance of the Thalvara warriors. Sam didn't move. He didn't flee. He didn't cower. He simply stood there, watching her, waiting, daring her to choose. Mira. Veskra's voice cut through the chaos, sharp and commanding. Lead the charge. This was the moment she had trained for, the moment her people expected. And yet, her feet refused to move. Instead, she spoke words that should have been impossible. Stand down. The battlefield seemed to freeze. The warriors halted mid-step, confusion rippling through their ranks. Veskra turned toward her, eyes narrowing. What did you say? Mira forced herself to meet the commander's gaze. Her body was rigid, every muscle screaming against the treasonous words she was about to utter. But she could not ignore the truth any longer. I said stand down. Silence fell like a thunderclap. Then, Veskra smiled. It was not a smile of amusement, not even one of anger. It was the cold, merciless smile of a predator about to sink its fangs into its prey. You've gone soft, Veskra murmured, stepping toward her. I warned you. Mira's fingers twitched toward her weapon. She should strike first, should draw her blade, prove her strength, reclaim her honor. But honor had brought her here, and for the first time, she no longer knew if she wanted it. I will not be part of this slaughter, Mira said, her voice steadier than she felt. Veskra's expression darkened. Then you are no longer one of us. And before Mira could react, the commander lunged. The plasma blade hissed as it ignited, a streak of white-hot energy slicing through the dust-choked air. Mira barely had time to block. Sparks erupted as their weapons clashed, the impact rattling through her bones. Veskra was fast, faster than anyone Mira had ever faced. She struck with lethal precision, each movement honed through years of battle. Mira barely kept up. The world blurred around her, the chaos of battle fading as her entire existence narrowed to this duel. She had fought for the Dominion her entire life, had trained under warriors who had carved empires from the stars. And yet, for the first time, she was losing. Not because Veskra was stronger, but because Mira was not fighting to win. She was fighting to survive. And that was a battle she had never trained for. A sharp pain tore through her side as Veskra's blade found its mark, searing flesh and armor alike. Mira stumbled, her vision flashing red. Veskra did not hesitate. She grabbed Mira by the throat, lifting her off the ground with terrifying ease. You disgust me, the commander hissed, her grip tightening. All that promise, all that strength, wasted on a man. Mira gasped, struggling, but Veskra's hold was unrelenting. Do you truly think he would do the same for you? Veskra sneered. Men are weak, Mira. He will let you die. Her vision darkened, and then, a gunshot. Veskra staggered, her grip loosening. Mira hit the ground hard, coughing as air rushed back into her lungs. She looked up and saw Sam, a smoking pistol in his hands. He had shot Veskra. A human had shot a Dominion commander. For her, the battlefield had turned against them. Veskra was wounded, but not dead. The moment she recovered, she would tear Sam apart. And Mira knew one thing with absolute certainty. The Dominion would never forgive this. Not for Sam, and not for her. There was only one way this could end. She turned to him, breathless. Run. Sam frowned. What? Run, she repeated, forcing herself to her feet. Now. He hesitated. Mira. I will hold them off, she snapped. But you have to go. He hesitated, but only for a second. Then, with one last searching look, he turned and ran. Mira exhaled sharply, steeling herself. Then, she turned to face Veskra. The commander was already rising, her wound barely slowing her. This is your last chance, she spat. Kill him. Prove yourself. Mira met her gaze and made her choice. No. Veskra's expression hardened. Then you are a traitor. The words should have gutted her, should have broken her. But as she watched Sam disappear into the horizon, she felt something strange. Not regret, not fear. Freedom. For the first time in her life, she was free, and the Dominion would never forgive her for it. The Dominion did not tolerate traitors. By the time the battle ended, Mira was already running. She did not look back. She did not hesitate. She only knew one thing. She had to find Sam. Before the Dominion did. Before it was too late. The Dagger of Korath was a Dominion warship designed for pursuit. Sleek, fast, and merciless. It cut through the storm-choked atmosphere of Zalvora. Six like a shadow, its engines whisper quiet as it scanned for fleeing targets. Inside, Mira sat in a cold, featureless cell, wrists bound in grav cuffs that hummed with energy, preventing even the smallest movement beyond what her captors allowed. She had fought. Oh, how she had fought. But against a full squadron of Thalvara warriors, even she had limits. The Dominion did not kill its traitors, not immediately. First, there were interrogations. Reconditioning. The slow, surgical process of breaking down whatever weakness had poisoned a warrior's mind. Mira had seen it done before. She had never imagined she would be the one in chains. The door hissed open. Commander Veskra stepped inside, her tall frame casting a long shadow. She no longer wore her battle helm, allowing Mira to see the contempt etched into her sharp features. The wound Sam had inflicted, a blaster burn just below her collarbone, had been sealed but not healed. Veskra had chosen to leave it that way, letting the pain fuel her rage. "You should be dead," she said simply. Mira said nothing. Veskra took a slow step forward, arms clasped behind her back. "You betrayed everything, Mira. Your honor, your sisters, your blood." Still, Mira did not answer. Veskra tilted her head. Was he worth it? The words struck deeper than the plasma blade had. Mira clenched her jaw, but she did not look away. Veskra's lips curled. "I saw it, you know. The way you looked at him. The way you hesitated." She knelt, bringing her face level with Mira's. "Do you think he will come for you?" A cruel smile. "He's already gone." Mira's pulse quickened. "Liar." Veskra chuckled. "You think he stayed? That he would risk his life for an alien woman?" She leaned closer, voice soft, venomous. "You are nothing to him." Mira wanted to believe that was a lie. She needed to believe it. But she had told Sam to run, and he had. "Do not worry," Veskra continued, standing once more. "We will find him, and when we do, you will watch him die." Something inside Mira snapped. Faster than the grav cuffs should have allowed, she lunged. Veskra barely had time to react before Mira's forehead slammed into her nose with a sickening crack. The commander stumbled back, blood streaking her face. For the first time, her composure wavered. Mira straightened, wiping blood from her own brow. And then she smiled. "Come and find him, then." Her voice was low, steady. "But you will have to go through me." The dagger of Korath remained in high orbit, locked in Dominion space, its security impenetrable. Mira had been transferred to a reinforced cell after attacking Veskra. Her restraints tripled, her movements monitored at all times. Escape was impossible. And yet, she was not alone. As the ship's systems hummed around her, a faint static crackled in her ear. Then, a voice. "Mira, you still breathing in there?" Her heart stopped. "Sam," she whispered. A short chuckle. "Took me a while to find the right channel. But yeah, it's me." She exhaled, her hands tightening into fists. "You fool. You should have run." "Tried," he admitted. "Didn't get far." Mira closed her eyes, cursing under her breath. Sam was here. On this ship. He had not abandoned her. Veskra was wrong. And for the first time since her capture, Mira felt something dangerous. "Hope." "How?" she asked. "Snuck aboard while they were busy dragging your stubborn ass inside," he said. "Figured you'd get yourself in trouble." Mira huffed. "And now?" "Now, we find a way out." She smirked. "Tell me you have a plan." Sam's voice crackled again, amusement laced with determination. "I got a few ideas." The dagger of Korath was a masterpiece of Dominion engineering, flawless in design, unassailable in function. But nothing was perfect. Every beast had a weak spot. Sam moved through the underbelly of the warship like a shadow, guided by instinct and the stolen schematics he had pulled from a terminal. Dominion architecture was sleek, efficient, but predictable. The maintenance shafts, the coolant systems, the power relays, everything followed a pattern. And Sam had spent his entire life breaking things for a living. He wasn't a soldier, but he was a miner. And when you spent years digging through hostile planets, avoiding cave-ins and equipment failures, you learned one universal truth. Everything could be broken. He clicked his comm. "Mira, how fast can you fight with those cuffs on?" A pause. Then, a dry chuckle. "Fast enough." "Good," he muttered, flipping a switch on the console in front of him. "Because I'm about to make a lot of people very angry." He pressed the detonator. The explosion rocked the dagger of Korath, sending alarms screaming through its corridors. The ship lurched, gravity fields flickering as power fluctuated. Mira felt the force of it even through the reinforced walls of her cell. Then, with a sharp click, her restraints powered down. The failsafe systems had been overridden. She did not waste time questioning how Sam had done it. She only moved. With a single breath, she slammed her heel into the door panel. Sparks erupted, and the reinforced steel groaned, then snapped. She was free, and now it was time to find him. Sam had barely made it 2 corridors before the first Dominion warriors found him. 3 of them, fully armored, plasma rifles raised. "Ah, hell," he muttered. Then, a blur of motion, a flash of violet energy. The first warrior fell before he could even react, Mira's plasma blade cutting through armor like paper. The second fired, too slow. Mira twisted, catching the shot on the flat of her blade before driving her knee into his throat. The third hesitated. That was his mistake. Mira's blade found his heart. Silence. Sam stared at her, breathless. She turned to him, eyes burning. "You took long enough," she said. Sam exhaled. "You're welcome." No time for arguments. No time for words. Only one goal remained. They had to escape before the Dominion burned them both. Sam didn't know much about war, but he knew what desperation looked like. And Mira was desperate, not in the frantic, reckless way of someone who had lost all hope, but in the way of someone who had everything to lose. She moved like a force of nature, her plasma blade carving through the narrow corridors of the Dagger of Karath with brutal efficiency. Sam followed in her wake, trying his best to not get himself killed. The ship was in chaos. The explosion he had triggered had knocked out a portion of the primary power grid, forcing the Dominion to divert their resources to containment rather than pursuit. That gave them a window, small, but real. Mira skidded to a halt at an intersection, glancing down both directions. "Where's your exit?" Sam pulled up the stolen schematics on his wrist comm. "There's a secondary hangar bay 3 decks down. Looks like it's used for patrol ships and supply transports." Mira nodded. "We take it." Sam hesitated. "You sure it's not?" A plasma blast hissed past his ear. Mira yanked him forward before he could finish his sentence. "Move." Sam decided against arguing. By the time they reached the hangar, the Dagger of Karath had begun full lockdown procedures. Sirens howled through the corridors, and the ship's automated defenses hummed to life. A dozen Dominion warriors stood between them and freedom. Veskra was one of them. The commander had not bothered to tend to the blood caked around her earlier wound. It was a badge of fury now, a symbol of unfinished business. Mira stepped forward. Veskra smiled. "Still protecting your pet?" she taunted. "How noble." Mira didn't rise to the bait. "You are wasting time," she said coldly. "Step aside." Veskra chuckled. "Or what?" Mira's plasma blade ignited. "Or I will end you." Silence. Then, Veskra sighed. "I am going to enjoy killing you, Mira." She lifted her hand, and the hangar erupted into violence. Sam hit the ground, rolling behind a stack of supply crates as Dominion fire filled the room with streaks of burning energy. Mira was already in the thick of it, her blade singing as it met steel and flesh. Veskra was just as fast. The 2 warriors clashed in the center of the battlefield, their movements a deadly dance of power and precision. Mira ducked, pivoted, drove forward. Veskra caught her strike, twisting her blade aside. Sam cursed, ducking another stray shot as he tried to reach the nearest shuttle controls. He had spent most of his life around machines, and if he knew one thing, there was always a backdoor. His fingers flew over the interface. Override code. Come on, come on." The shuttle doors hissed open. He grinned. "Mira," he shouted. "Let's go." But Mira wasn't listening. She was losing. Veskra was stronger, and Mira's exhaustion was finally catching up to her. The commander struck hard, knocking her plasma blade aside before driving her knee into Mira's ribs. She staggered, and in that instant, Sam saw it. The killing blow. Veskra's blade descended, and Sam moved. Not thinking, not hesitating. He moved. The gun in his hand barked once. Veskra jerked backward, clutching her side. The shot hadn't been lethal, but it had been enough. Mira didn't waste the moment. With a sharp, vicious strike, she drove her plasma blade straight through Veskra's chest. The commander's eyes widened. Her lips parted. Whether in shock or fury, Mira never knew. Then, with a final exhale, she fell. Dead. Mira, we have to go, Sam called. Mira stood over Veskra's body for only a second longer. Then she turned and ran. They boarded the shuttle, and Sam punched the launch sequence as fast as humanly possible. Alarms screamed. Dominion ships scrambled to intercept them. The dagger of Korath began shifting course, preparing to fire. And then, they were out. The shuttle burst from the hangar in a blur of fire and momentum, plunging into the void. Sam gripped the controls, guiding them through the chaos, dodging plasma fire, twisting through the storm of debris. Then, the stars opened before them. The Dominion fleet fell away, and in the next breath, they were free. Sam exhaled, hands still clenched around the controls. Mira was silent beside him, staring out the viewport. She was free, and yet, she had lost everything. Her rank, her home, her people, everything she had ever known. Sam hesitated, then glanced at her. "What now?" he asked. Mira did not answer immediately. Then, slowly, she turned to him, and she smiled. It was small, tired, but real. "We keep running," she said. Sam chuckled. "Well then," he said, stretching, "guess I better get used to running with you." Mira tilted her head. "You are not afraid?" "Terrified," he admitted. "But hey, I'd rather be terrified with you than safe without you." Mira laughed. A real, genuine laugh. And as the stars stretched before them, endless and unknown, she knew that, for the first time in her life, she was exactly where she wanted to be.